Hello, welcome back to Madrona's Pulse Teachings. I am Iris, and we are chatting about Venus retrograde because Venus retrograde is here. So, Venus stations retrograde on March 1st at around 10 degrees of Aries. So, she is going to journey back through those first 10 degrees of Aries, and then she's going to re enter Pisces. She's going to go back towards about 24 degrees of Pisces, and then on April 12th, she will station direct and she will make her way back. So we are journeying with Venus retrograde through all of March, almost half of April, and it is not until May that we're kind of coming out of that whole integrative journey once she's direct and moving back through all of that Pisces and Aries terrain. And it's pretty potent this next season that we are journeying with Venus retrograde. And this is, of course, also happening. We are in eclipse season now. Our Pisces new moon just brought us into eclipse season. So we have Venus retrograde for eclipse season. She is actually conjunct Neptune in the North Node for our solar eclipse at the end of March. We also have Venus retrograde overlapping with what is going to be a Mercury retrograde coming later in March, and Mercury is going through the same terrain of Aries and Pisces. So, and then of course at the end of March, while Venus is retrograde, we're going to have Neptune move into Aries. So this is a dynamic month. We are in it. It is, Venus retrograde includes eclipse season. And there's a lot of different ways to look at and talk about Venus retrograde. There's all different ways that we can talk about the archetype of Venus and how she impacts our daily life, our values, our love, relationship. I am going to focus here on really how this Venus retrograde is speaking to a very large, big cycle that has to do with our spiritual paths. Because this Venus retrograde is so important. It's so important because there is so much going on. And it's really important to look at what she is asking of us, every retrograde. And let's remember, we've just come out of that journey of Mars retrograde, which is also a layer of this Venus retrograde because Mars rules Aries, and this is the sign that she starts her retrograde in. And every retrograde is asking us to unlearn and to realign. And so we look at the archetypes of Venus, and she is all about our values, our desire. Desire is a really big one with Venus and Aries. And how we move from self-love into love of others, love of life, respect of others. But she really wants us to be attuned. Venus brings us into our values, and that's why a Venus journey is a very personal journey. And usually there's quite a lot of unlearning because a lot of us are brought up, both from family and culturally, with values that we don't align with. And a lot of us can spend decades pursuing lives around certain values that are so socially, we're so conditioned to believe that that's what we're supposed to value. And so that's a type of job or a type of person that we kind of join ourselves to. And part of the Venus journey is really, and Venus retrograde especially, is unlearning some of the ways that we've had values and the way that those values come up in our lives and what our more authentic values are. And this Venus retrograde brings us into our deepest desires, like desire with a capital D is what Venus is asking us to become aware of as she makes this journey first through Aries. And the lesson here, it's very similar to the lesson that we were working with Mars. Remember, Mars moved from fire into water. In order for Mars to reclaim that creative spark that is Leo, it had to go on a massive reprogramming of self-care and self-love through Cancerian waters. This Venus wants us to be aligned with this almost raw primal desire of love, that then we let that be in us and it moves us in the direction of our lives that we want to move. And yet, in order for that to happen, she has to go back into Pisces. And she doesn't just have to go back into Pisces. She has to conjunct Neptune, the North Node, and Saturn in Pisces. And she conjuncts Neptune and the North Node during our last eclipse of this eclipse season. So there is a very, and when she's in Pisces, there is something there that is saying we need to realign to our soul, literally to our soul's path in this life. And also how important this journey is for all of us collectively, because there's a lot going on in this world right now. And, you know, you can kind of watch when we use archetypal and evolutionary astrology, it does give a lens to interpret how things are happening in the collective and to see another story that's much, much bigger and much more real in a soul reality. And this Venus retrograde is part of that other story. And it is also saying that whatever's going on in the collective, there's something deeply personal for all of us, because Venus is very personal. And, you know, a lot of times when you see Venus in Aries, and I've seen a lot of it on social media, you know, it's kind of this like, you go girl, you get what you want. You can have anything you want. You want a private jet. You got, you know, it's like all this manifesting. And it's kind of toxic from a capitalistic, colonial, patriarchal perspective. And this retrograde says, yeah, you have desires and they are to be manifested. And they need to be fueled by divine love. They need to be aligned with that which connects us to all that is so much bigger than us, and how that cosmic song, Neptune and Venus, is part of it beating in our own heart, in our own soul song, that then, come really May, we're going to move into the world with in a new way. And we're going to be rooted. Not even rooted, we're going to have had, you know, a psyche cleanse in our own psyche that is allowing us to shed. You know, part of the Venus retrograde is a story of death and rebirth, and to shed what we've been driven by in our values, in our goals, in our drive, in our concept of love that hasn't really been coming from our heart. And that which fuels our heart, which is divine love in this journey, especially when we are here in this community on spiritual paths. And so there is so much to open to. And there is also so much that can come up. It's as personal as it gets with this Venus retrograde starting in Aries, you know? And it's like there's that flame that we all have that's driving us, that's our personal desire that then goes, you know, it's what we really value. And it's like that flame needs to be realigned at what is its source of fire. And that source of fire for Aries is always Pisces. We get birthed through the Pisces canal and we come into the primal first breath of Aries. And what do you know? Venus is going to be conjunct the sun pretty closely to that primal first breath. They're going to have their conjunction at 2 degrees of Aries on March 22nd, right? And then a few days later, Venus will move back into Pisces. And so there is, you know, this is a cycle of a death. This is a cycle of a death of what has been fueling our desires. Why did I think I needed to start this project? Why did I think I needed to go after that certificate? Why did I think I had to do this? And to get so honest with ourselves about what fuels our desires. And if it is not coming from unconditional love, you know, if we're still trying to prove something, Aries can get caught up trying to prove something. If Aries is moving from a place of fear or a place of shame, Aries gets extremely competitive and it wants to prove that it can get where it said it's going to go. and it wants to get there quickly. And Venus going retrograde, and the ruler of that Aries is Mars, who is newly washed in Cancerian waters about what self-love is for our drive. And that is always a layer of this retrograde, that Mars. And so this is about, really getting honest with ourselves and saying, what are my values now? What were my values, back in 2024, right before that Mars went retrograde, which is at the very beginning of November? And what are my values now at this moment in 2025? And how is the world being shaped in a particular way that all of this Neptune, Pisces, last degrees of Pisces energy signals it is so important for all of us as individuals to honor, hear, respect, and love the vocational call wherever it's leading us. And vocation doesn't have anything to do with how much money we make or career. It has to do with the call. That's literally what the root of the word takes us into, from that which is beyond. And that is what Neptune is speaking out to our soul. And it's going into Venus during this retrograde. And it is being reprogrammed. And it could be wild. It could be beautiful. It could be the most beautiful calling, and it might make no sense, and it might be what the soul wants, and then that Venus works to bring it in, to be cleansed when she's conjunct Saturn. And then she'll station direct in April, and then she'll move forward. And then she gets to bring all of that into Aries, and we get to move forward with values and desire and love that is both for ourselves and for others. But especially for ourselves with Venus and Aries, that's driven by that Pisces energy, that's driven by that vocational call, that's driven by the intuition that connects us with that which is so much bigger than us, with that which the rational mind cannot put into one of its boxes of linearity. Venus is going back to the final degrees of Pisces to be conjunct Neptune during an eclipse. There is absolutely nothing explicit, linear, or neatly categorized about that. It is non-linear. It takes us beyond the limits of what we can rationally understand, and it offers a spiritual opening that we can integrate so personally. Now, with that comes shedding, a release, a death process. That is part of eclipse season. It is part of of Venus's retrograde, and so it also could bring grief up. It could bring understanding of the past, understanding of our own drives that we've had, of why we've gone down certain paths, of who we've put ourselves into relationship with, of what we've been searching for, of how there might have actually been wounds from the past, from childhood, that those desires have just been trying to fill and prove ourselves. And that's all important because it got us right to this moment. But this moment is a moment in which Neptune is about to enter Aries and start a whole new cycle for the boundaries of reality and how we understand ourselves as humans on our individual path and as a collective. And this Venus is making that so personal and offering us an opportunity for us to come into new beginnings with what love with a capital L, divine love, is actually able to manifest in this plane. And it's magical. The potential for that is here. And that's the bigger story. That is what is going on. And we can be embodying that and working with that and listening and tuning in, allowing old stories to surface, allowing grief to come up, grief is part of the Pisces archetype, especially the final degrees, especially when Neptune is there during an eclipse. And yet that north node is there as well. And it's whatever is coming up and clearing and shedding. There is also a new opening and a new beginning. And you can't escape that something has to shed in order for the new beginning to come. Not in these cycles. Not when we're talking about that crossover between the Aries and the Pisces threshold. And yet there's such deep and passion and cosmic rhythms of passion and divine love that are carrying us through. And we can really open to that. And it is, again, with that Venus in Aries stage, it really is an unlearning of what we've been taught about desire. And we're not going to fully understand what that is until Venus has gone back through Pisces, stationed direct, and begun her journey back and crossing over that threshold again. And then she comes into Aries, and then we enter May, and that is when we have the integration. But right now, we're just starting the retrograde. So we are just entering into this journey of unlearning about desire and unlearning about what we might have been taught and how we've been embodying our values. Aries is the body as well, in a fire way, but it's how we move spirit through the body and how we embody spirit without thinking about it. And so that's another, there's a strong opportunity with Venus retrograde in Aries, because Aries does not think about what it's got to do. It feels it and it responds. And that's when it's aligned. When it's not aligned, it's reacting. And that's when Aries can get into a little bit of trouble. And so Venus, with the Venus going retrograde, this is a bit of a starting and stopping around, what are my values? What is my desire? What is it leading me towards? And there needs to be some reassessment. There needs to be some pulling back. And that can be difficult for Aries. But Venus is retrograde in Aries, and that's what we're here to be with. And so if you're feeling that, especially during these next few weeks, just allowing. And maybe we have to sidestep. Maybe we don't actually know what we want. And that is okay, because the clarity will come later. And we can't have that clarity because Venus has to go back and talk with Neptune, and there has to be the eclipses of March, and Neptune has to enter Aries. So we are in a liminal realm. March is a liminal month. And when we are in liminality, we cannot expect to understand things in a concrete way. We can't expect life to fit into those boxes of linear understanding and explicit categories. That is not how liminality works. When we surrender to being in a liminal place, it is absolutely gorgeous. It is beautiful. But the struggle comes when we're trying to force it into something that it's not, when we're trying to understand it from that cognitively driven, really usually desire for control. And whenever there's a desire for control, what's behind that desire is fear. Okay, and Venus retrograde in Aries could bring up some fear. It could bring up some primal fears. And remembering that if they're coming up, especially around our own desire, our self-worth, our value, they're coming up so that we can witness them and release them and find healing. And the healing is Venus firstly, the healing is sometimes just witnessing. And then as Venus moves into Pisces, that is when she gets to go be reprogrammed with spirit and these kind of cosmic songs. And that then becomes a deep healing that we integrate and then we will move forward with. And of course, yes, Venus also is who we're in relationships with. She is divine feminine energy. She does connect to income especially around our values. Are our values aligned with? Are we making money in a way that is aligned with my values? Here, the core of the values that are aligned to my spiritual path. Am I spending money in a way that's aligned? And that's kind of where those other layers connect into the the higher frequency, we could say, of Venus. And she's going to align with Neptune, who's the higher frequency of her, and it is just big. Okay, so there's a lot. I will definitely be doing a lot more check-ins around Venus retrograde, especially in my daily written posts. If you don't know that I do daily written posts, I do daily written posts, and they're in the community tab here on YouTube. I also post them on Instagram. And we will just see. Welcome to March. Welcome to the liminal realms, and I will be seeing you soon. Be well.